No one in their right mind would let a stranger's child climb into their lap in a crowded place. That was what someone blurted out that morning in a small diner in Ashland. But she wasn't crazy. She only saw a disabled little boy trembling under the table, driven to panic by the noise, and a millionaire single father sitting frozen in helpless silence, accustomed to pitting stares. No one stepped forward. No one did anything, except her. She knelt on the floor, opened her arms, and whispered, "If you want, I'll be your safe place." No one expected that. Yet that seemingly small moment set in motion a journey that would change three lives forever. All right, my dear viewers, stay tuned for a story that will leave you speechless. Take a second to like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see people joining us from all around the world. Willow's Kitchen is the kind of diner where nobody ever needs to look at a menu. Everything there feels familiar. The tinkling bell above the door whenever a customer walks in, the heady aroma of pancakes mingling with dark roasted coffee, and that corner table claimed every Sunday morning for 2 decades by the same elderly couple. To many in Ashland, it's simply a peaceful stopping point. But to Talia Monroe, it is her entire world. The 23-year-old has called this place home for nearly 3 years. In her faded apron and scuffed heel shoes, she has become part of the town's unhurried rhythm. No one knows exactly what burden she bears, yet everyone senses there's something both warm and sorrowful in Talia's smile. Since her grandmother fell into chronic heart failure and her mother walked away, she has been her family's sole pillar. Each morning, she starts by squeezing fresh orange juice, shepherding her little sister to school, caring for her bedridden grandmother, and only then racing off to begin her shift that stretches into the late afternoon. Talia has never taken more than a single day off. She memorizes every order without writing a word down, always recalls which jam a regular prefers, and never lacks the patience to check in on each customer as if they were long-lost relatives. Yet beneath all that skill, hard work, and attentiveness lies a single driving fear. Fear of mounting bills, fear of a summons from the hospital, fear that she might not have the strength to go on tomorrow. That morning, the diner was packed. Children laughed, silverware clinked against plates and glasses, servers called out orders without pause. As always, Talia weaved deftly between tables, balancing trays, offering smiles, guessing the usual favorites of those she's served before. Everything ran smoothly until a man walked in. He was tall, upright, wearing a slate gray coat and sunglasses. Yet all eyes were drawn, not to him, but to the boy at his side, a frail little kid clutching a plastic toy, stepping hesitantly as though the floor might give way at any moment. Jonathan Blake, a billionaire in the aerospace industry, though no one here had any idea, and he didn't want them to know. Today, he was simply a single father trying to get his son out of the house without triggering a meltdown. His son Eli, 7 years old, had been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at age 3. He feared noise, feared strangers, even feared pitting glances. Every time Jonathan tried to take him into public, it ended with early departure, his son sobbing in his arms, and apologies no one cared to hear. Minutes after sitting down, Eli began to curl in on himself. The clatter of a spoon against a glass made him flinch. His eyes widened. His breath came in short gasps. His small hands pressed tightly over his ears until they trembled. Then, as if by instinct, he crawled beneath the table, folding himself up to disappear from the world. Jonathan froze. One hand pulled out a chair. The other reached down. He murmured soothing words, but only made Eli more frightened. Eyes around the room shifted toward them. No one spoke, but no words were needed. Jonathan knew all too well that sinking feeling, being seen as a nuisance performance in a place meant to be calm. Then Talia appeared. She didn't say, "I'm sorry," nor "What's wrong?" She simply stepped forward, lowered herself, and sat cross-legged on the floor at the boy's eye level. No unnecessary movement, no hint of hesitation. A hush fell over the hubbub behind them. Then in a voice soft as silk, she whispered, "If you're scared, I can be your safe place. Would you like to sit in my lap?" Eli did not respond at once. His eyes were still wet, his breathing ragged. But then, ever so slowly, he crept out from under the table and settled into Talia's arms. His tiny hands wrapped around her waist as though clinging to a lifeline in a vast ocean. And at that very moment, Jonathan felt something catch in his throat. How could a complete stranger make his son feel so safe?
Welcome to 30 Millionaire Stories, where success meets solitude, and every story heals a hidden wound. Subscribe and discover the heart behind the fortune.
Jonathan was accustomed to being watched, not because he was a successful businessman, but because of the uncomfortable, curious stares whenever he appeared in public with Eli. Heads would turn slowly, yet eyes still probed, forced smiles from restaurant staff, and hushed whispers, small enough to be almost inaudible, yet deep enough to wound a lone father's spirit. He'd learned to retreat before the storm hit, to pretend he wasn't hurt. But the hurt remained, accumulating, gnawing, and silently making him wonder, is my son a burden to the world? Eli didn't speak much. He wasn't good at showing emotions, but the slight tremor at his fingertips, the tentative steps pressed close to his father, and the soft whimpers whenever the world grew too loud, all were distress signals that almost no one noticed, except Jonathan, and now except Talia. She didn't ask him a single question. She offered no advice. She didn't say, "You should do this," or "I know someone who can help." Instead, she simply sat there, steadfast and gentle. When Eli settled into her lap, Talia remained perfectly still. She laid a soft hand on his back, moving in rhythm as though she were tuning into the breathing of a tiny soul struggling with the world. No pitying glances, no ostentatious sympathy, only a silent, understanding presence. Then she began to hum, not a recognizable tune, perhaps an old lullaby known only to those who have cradled a child at midnight. Her voice wasn't perfect, but it flowed like water, warm as a breath, enough to soothe that small heart after its panic. Jonathan sat there, neither touching his phone nor glancing at his watch. He simply watched. In that moment, the world around him faded away. Every sound became distant background noise. Every motion slowed. All he could see was his son at peace in the arms of a stranger, and for the first time in ages, the boy did not shy away. He couldn't understand why Talia did it. No introductions, no motive. She acted as though it were only natural to help a frightened child. The meal went on, but in a different atmosphere. Eli eventually slipped out of her lap and climbed onto his father's chair. He still clutched his plastic dinosaur, but his hand no longer trembled. He said nothing, yet he sat still, and to Jonathan, that was a small miracle. Talia brought out the food as though nothing extraordinary had happened. She took orders, chatted with the neighboring table, and now and then asked if Eli would like more orange juice. Not in a pushy way, but in a manner that let him refuse and still feel respected. Jonathan wanted to say something, an expression of thanks, a gesture of recognition, or simply a meaningful nod. But his throat tightened. His gratitude was too vast for words. At checkout, he left a larger tip than usual. Not because she needed the money, but because he needed to show that he had seen and he appreciated. Yet what truly lingered with him after leaving that diner was not on the bill. It was the image of a young woman sitting on a cold floor, holding an unfamiliar child, singing a nameless lullaby, just to help someone feel a little less alone for a few minutes. And as he closed Willow's kitchen door behind him, something quietly echoed in his heart. Not everyone will walk away. Not everyone fears difference. And sometimes, the safest place for a child's heart isn't at home, but in the arms of a stranger who knows how to stay. Could he believe that? For the first time in many years, he wanted to return. Jonathan told no one that he had returned to Willow's kitchen. No driver, no assistant, no friends. Just himself stepping into the little diner where, for the first time in many years, he felt something genuine, nothing calculated. He chose the same old table, not consciously, but every stride led him there as though a new habit had already formed. Sometimes he came alone, quietly savoring his coffee, reading the paper, gazing out the window at elderly couples and school children biking by. Other times he brought Eli along. The boy sat next to him, still clutching his plastic dinosaur, but his eyes no longer brimmed with anxiety. All it took was seeing Talia approach for his face to relax, as if he knew he would be all right. Talia never asked why they kept coming back. She didn't need to know their reasons. She simply did her job, delivered the menu, offered a gentle smile, and left enough space for others to be themselves. Their conversations never began with grand questions. They grew from small details, like Talia's love of iced coffee even in winter, or how she always stashed a mint in her pocket to offer a crying child. With each visit, Jonathan came to appreciate the quiet strength in the way she existed. No need to impress, no need to speak much, yet she always made people feel seen. One crisp morning, the diner was emptier than usual. Talia brought his coffee, then lingered just a moment longer. Her hand rested lightly on the counter, as though holding back words she couldn't voice. They began to share more private things, about the early mornings she spent cooking for her grandmother, then cycling her sister to school before rushing into her shift, about the scholarship that had once been within reach. She told him that on the day she received her acceptance letter to the State University's child psychology program, her grandmother suffered a stroke. Her mother had long since left. Talia was all that remained, and she chose to stay. "No regrets," she said, eyes on the window pane. "Just, sometimes I wonder if I could choose again. Would I do it differently?" Jonathan said nothing, but something stirred within him, not because the story was heartbreaking, but because she didn't share it for pity. She didn't need rescuing. She simply offered it, like lighting a small lamp in a dark room, not to illuminate the whole world, but to say, "I'm still here, I haven't given up." On another morning, as Eli doodled on a napkin, Jonathan found himself asking, almost without thinking, if you had the chance to go back to college, no tuition worries, nothing else holding you back, would you? Talia froze. She looked at him, surprised and a little uncertain. Then she smiled, a wistful smile, like a half-finished song. "Absolutely," she said. "But who would ever give someone like me that chance?" Her words, seemingly gentle, hit him like a quiet but powerful wave. She said it not out of expectation, but out of habit, used to being passed over, used to doors closing before she could even knock. Jonathan remained silent, but inside him, a decision was taking shape. She didn't know the man across from her had the power to write a life-changing check. But what moved him to act did not come from pity, but from an inexplicable belief. If the world needs healers, she was one of them. And perhaps, for the first time in a long while, he had met someone who didn't need him for his wealth, yet deserved everything he could give. Perhaps it was time to do something far bigger than simply returning to an old diner. Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or grab a drink, then stay tuned for the surprising next chapter. Comment 1 if you're enjoying the story so far, and let us know you're still here. On Tuesday afternoon, amid the rush of service and the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, Talia was summoned to the counter to receive an envelope bearing her name. No one knew who had sent it. She wiped her hands, still scented faintly of dish soap, swiftly accepted the plain envelope, without logo or return address. Only a name, Talia Monroe, handwritten in neat, slanted ink, radiating respect. She did not open it immediately. A gentle intuition stirred within her, like a soft breeze. No flutter of excitement, no anxious heartbeat, just a quiet sense, as if the universe were whispering, "Pause. Read this. It's for you." In that moment, the world around her seemed to blur. Her hand trembled slightly as she tore the envelope's edge. A thick sheet of paper, printed in dignified black type, emerged from the thin wrapper. The first line made her catch her breath. Congratulations. You have been selected to receive the full scholarship from the Aspen Hope Initiative. Her eyes scanned each line in disbelief. 4 years of tuition, academic materials, a monthly living stipend, academic mentorship support, everything covered. No strings attached. No explanations from the benefactor. She read her own name on the letter over and over, afraid that if she blinked, it might vanish. The hand holding the paper began to shake. Her heart raced, not from being overwhelmed by opportunity, but from the awakening of a part of her long dormant. The dream she once thought shattered beneath responsibilities and sacrifice was now neatly restored, whole, warm, and waiting for her to step forward. She didn't realize when the tears began. Quiet droplets fell onto the counter where she had stood hundreds of times before, clutching bills and running calculations in her head. But today, there were no numbers. Only the tender surprise of kindness arriving at exactly the right moment. A co-worker gently placed a hand on her shoulder and quietly asked if she was all right. Talia said nothing. She looked up, and through the frosted glass partition, she saw him, Jonathan, seated at his usual table, his coffee cup beside him, eyes silently watching the street beyond. He did not smile, nor did he wave. He simply was there, a presence perfectly timed yet never demanding acknowledgement. Talia stepped forward. No need to reapply makeup, no need to hide her tears. She walked straight to his table, the scholarship letter trembling in her hand. She paused. No rehearsed question necessary. Was this you? Jonathan met her gaze without recoiling, without evasion. He did not feign surprise. He did not utter formalities like, I have no idea what you mean. He simply smiled, a rare, profound smile that spoke louder than any words. It was you who inspired me. And in that response, there was no gift bestowed, only faith. Talia said nothing further. She sat beside him, her eyes still wet but softened. Not everyone gets to see light return to everyday life. Not everyone is granted a second chance. But today, she had been chosen, not by luck, but because someone recognized in her something she had long forgotten, her worth. That day, Talia did not need to know who he was, nor how wealthy he might be. The only thing she needed to know, and enough to carry with her always, was that someone believed in her when she had not yet dared to believe in herself. And sometimes a single letter does more than open the door to a lecture hall. It opens the door back to one's true self. Talia hadn't had much time to sit still since receiving the scholarship. Her life became a hurried symphony of lectures, shifts at the diner, rushed meals for her grandmother and sister, and late-night study sessions. Yet strangely, she had never felt more whole. What changed wasn't the number of hours in a day, but the feeling that she was no longer alone. Jonathan didn't intrude on her life. He never called at midnight, never suggested grand gifts. But his presence, steady and quiet, was like an outstretched arm ready to catch her when she felt weary. He did not arrive as a savior. He walked beside her as someone who believed in the path she had chosen. And to Talia, that mattered more than any financial support. The idea for a support center for children with disabilities didn't spring from boardroom meetings, but from evenings she spent after class, listening to professors speak of the lack of early intervention services in rural communities. Talia wasn't studying merely for a degree. She studied with real passion, to bring the safety Eli had once found to many more children. One day she sketched her concept on a diner napkin, a place without car horns, without pitying looks, without pressure to be normal, a place where children are heard before they're labeled, welcomed before they're diagnosed. Jonathan looked at her rough drawing without laughter or claims that it was too ambitious. He simply placed his hand lightly on the napkin and nodded, and that was enough. 6 months later, the Mabel Center was born. An old red brick building on the town's edge was renovated. Walls were painted in soothing hues. A small garden of wild daisies and benches was created for children not to read. There's a music room, a therapy suite, an art corner, and even a space where parents are guided on how to communicate kindly with their children. The center was named for Talia's grandmother, the woman who taught her that love is shown through actions, not lectures, who gave her the patience the outside world had tested. Naming it Mabel was more than tribute. It was how Talia made memory come alive, a legacy of compassion. Eli was the first to transform. The boy who once trembled under a table now serves as the center's unofficial greeter. Whenever a new child arrives, fearful, clinging to a parent, Eli steps forward, offering a soft toy or simply sitting beside them, saying nothing, just being there so the newcomer doesn't feel alone. Talia watches those moments from a distance, her heart tightening not in emotion, but in recognition that what they're doing truly matters. Jonathan rarely appears in the spotlight. He stands behind fundraisers, handles legal paperwork, approves design details. He doesn't need his name on a plaque or public acclaim. He only needs to see Eli smile, to see Talia amid children finger painting, her eyes bright, gentle, steady, and sparkling like morning sunlight. Between them, there are no grand declarations of love, no I love you or be mine. But Jonathan's look every time Talia kneels to tie a trembling child's shoelaces says it all. Once, as she wiped a whiteboard after an activity, she found him at the door holding a stack of papers but looking at her as though the rest of the world had faded away. No words needed, none were spoken. Love sometimes doesn't begin with a kiss. It begins with trust, with the repeated choice, each morning upon waking, to remain. To stand by that person, to nurture the small things that grow day by day, and that is enough. For some loves never need to be spoken to become eternal. They simply need to be lived. In every deed, every child held close, every smile that finds safety. That evening, the sky was painted in gentle shades of orange, as if nature itself had slowed down to witness something sacred. The second-floor balcony of the Mabel Center became the simplest date spot Talia had ever known. No candles, no background music, just children's laughter drifting up from the courtyard and the late-day light slowly settling over the treetops. Talia had just graduated. Her diploma wasn't a grand victory, but to her, it proved what no one thought she could achieve. She finished her degree while working full-time, caring for her family, and nurturing a second home for children in need. As she sat on the wooden chair pushed against the railing, her hands still trembling from the ceremony, she said nothing. She simply drew a long breath, and for the first time in ages, felt a profound peace. Jonathan sat beside her, with Eli curled up in his lap by habit. The boy was taller now, spoke in full sentences, and laughed more freely than ever before. Yet in his eyes was still that gentle awareness, the gentleness of someone who had known pain and now knew how to recognize safety. Jonathan gently squeezed her hand. His grip was as steady as on that very first morning, but now it felt warm instead of cold. There were no roses, no diamond ring, nothing but their full presence and unwavering gazes. "I thought I'd never love again," he said, his voice steady and low. "But then you came, without trying, and made my heart come alive." Talia turned to him, her clear eyes reflecting an emotion that needed no name. She rested her head on his shoulder. The breeze swept through her hair, soft as forgiveness. "I once thought I didn't deserve happiness," she whispered. "But you believed in me, before I dared believe in myself." Between them lay a choice, not one born of circumstance, nor of a fleeting moment. They had truly seen each other, through pain, through responsibility, through everyday exhaustion. And in that, they discovered something stronger than love: steadfastness. They didn't throw an extravagant wedding. No castle, no lavish gown, no celebrity guests. On their vow day, the air was cool. Everyone gathered behind the Mabel Center, where string lights hung overhead. Cookies lined the tables. and children played around a petite wedding cake made from two pancakes drizzled with syrup. They spoke no ornate vows. They simply looked at one another, then nodded, as two companions who had traveled far and now chose to journey on together. Eli was the ring bearer. He stood between them, hand trembling, but eyes shining bright. The entire center fell silent when he said, "Thank you for being my home." Talia hadn't just changed her own life. She had healed a man who believed his heart would remain frozen forever. She had given faith to a child once hiding beneath a table in fear of the world. And through small acts, she had kindled hope in a community that once thought difference was something to hide. What began on an ordinary morning, when a waitress knelt on the floor, arms outstretched to a terrified stranger, had become an unimaginable journey. A center, a home, a family. And in that first embrace, she did more than comfort a child. She rewrote the definition of love, not by finding someone perfect, but by choosing one another each day, in every small act, every scar, and every shared moment, building something greater than themselves. Perhaps the most beautiful thing in life isn't what we chase, but the people we choose to hold hands with and choose to stay. Talia was neither wealthy nor called extraordinary, yet she became a simple miracle in the life of a sensitive child, a father full of cracks, in a community weary of hope. And you know what? It all began with a single small act, an embrace, a choice not to turn away, a silent minute spent beside someone in fear. This story reminds us that you don't have to be someone great to make a difference. You only need to be present with an unjudging heart. If this story moved you, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and hit follow to join us for the next healing journeys. Thank you for staying until the very end, because you too can be part of the miracle.